Hello, everyone, and this is Maria Maksakova's new program in English with famous people. And first, most famous person we have invited, ah, Maria, if you allow me to introduce Colonel Tiso, Roland Tiso. This man, I can talk about him forever. As you can see behind him, there are his awards and his travels, and this man is a legend among many, many warriors, among soldiers, sailors, airmen, and every kind of man of war. Colonel Tiso graduated from famous VMI, Virginia Military Institute, and he became a second lieutenant of infantry. He served for as long as God's been around. And I had the pleasure in my career to serve alongside with a brave colonel. We had lots of training together in fighting terrorism, serving in the United Nations. Colonel Tiso, if you ever watched the movie The War Machine, and if you can ever call anybody a war machine, that is Colonel Tiso. And he would always pass by me. He loved me very much. Am I right, Colonel? Because I had jumped.
Absolutely.
And Colonel Tiso would say to me, he would say, Yuri, you gained weight. Let's run. And we ran. Then we fought and we fought and then we ran and then we ran and then we fought and he beat the shit out of me every time. And I kept thinking, how is that 45-year-old man who is should be dead by now, so old, keeps beating me in everything? And I was, but he was getting me in shape every time. And to this day, when I exercise, my wife tells me, she says, what would Colonel Tiso say about that? And I would say, Colonel Tiso served in Iraq, of course. He served with the United Nations. We fought terrorism together. We've been in Poland together when Colonel Tiso with the Ukrainian forces in Iraq. He received very high awards, medals from Iraq. One of them is lost. I kept trying to locate it, even involving Minister of Defense of Ukraine to locate it, but then the war happened and it's chaos there. So maybe one day we will find that medal that was awarded to Colonel Tiso, his actions in Iraq. So as you can people see above Colonel Tiso's head, there's like a halo there. That's an infantry combat badge, if I pronounce it right. That means that Colonel Tiso has been in combat and led men in war. Oh, I can talk about this man forever. Also, Colonel Tiso, how old are you now?
I'm 72, Yuri.
72. How many push-ups can you do?
Oh, I might do maybe 60, 70 just to warm up.
Yeah, 60, 70 push-ups just to warm up. And Colonel Tiso is also a champion of a bodybuilding. And if we will show his picture of a bodybuilding, and the Colonel, I got to ask you one question that is probably a little bit intimate. That number you wear, 11, on your,
11.
is that, why is the 11? Why is 11?
Well, actually, Yuri, I've only worn that number once, but that was at the National Physique Committee National Championships, which are held annually in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And that photo was taken of me when I was a competitor for the national championships. And this year in July, I hope to return to Pittsburgh to compete once again. And
Well,
hopefully I can get number 11 because I believe it will bring me good luck.
I tell everybody it's because of me. So Colonel T is married also as long as God's been around for 40 years. His anniversary is coming up to lovely Judy Tiso, and he has two beautiful daughters. Uh, and I'm very, very proud that in my life I had a leader and a mentor such as Colonel Tiso, although we ended up at the end of our career the same rank, which is a very respectable rank, I might say modestly. But This day, I called Colonel Tiso sir, and I call him my boss. I always call him boss because he'll always be my colonel. So now, Maria, take over, torture him, ask him questions, and I'm sure Colonel will answer them, but then be careful because he might have to kill you afterwards.
Um, Everything is just so amazing. Really, thank you so much uh, for finding time for us. In fact, Gary did all the job for me. It was very kind of you. And now I only have to mention that this is Maksakova TV, and everyone is very welcome. We are filming our second program, Synthetic Warfare. And my questions are mainly something about that subject. And I was thinking about how many achievements you have, Colonel. And well, among all of them, I want to mention that you are the only American to have received the Ukrainian Order of Valor and Honor for combat action in Iraq.
Correct.
Can I ask you to comment? How did that happen?
Oh my. Well, I had the pleasure of serving as the senior advisor to the multinational division Central South, which was commanded by a Polish two-star general, Major General Andrzej Tyskiewicz. But under him were three brigades. One was commanded by the Spanish. One was commanded, of course, by the Poles, and the other was commanded by the Ukrainians. And I took great pleasure in particular to serve as the brigade advisor to the Ukrainian brigade. The brigade operated in the east of, uh, of Iraq, along the Iranian border, and in the town of Al Qut, again in eastern Iraq, and then further east to the Iranian border. And along the Iranian border, they had a very difficult mission of attempting to stem the tide of infiltration from the neighboring country of Iran. And even when it was quiet elsewhere in Iraq, the Ukrainians were in action almost every night. And so I took it upon myself to be available to the Ukrainian commander whenever I could break contact, as we say, from my duties at division level and serve with the Ukrainians in the field. There were numerous combat actions in which I am very, very proud to have participated in with my Ukrainian comrades. They were some of the finest soldiers with whom I have ever worked in any uniform. And the ones along the border were Ukrainian paratroopers who were augmented by Ukrainian mechanized infantry. They were an absolute pleasure to work with. They lived under very difficult conditions in abandoned Iraqi forts that were built during the Iran-Iraq War. They had very little comforts. They went out every day, every night, and they had tremendous results along the border and made a tremendous difference in the combined operations conducted by coalition forces during the period that they were deployed from 2003 until 2008. I am extremely proud of having served with the Ukrainian Brigade, and I count the award of the Order of Valor and Honor among my most cherished honors and possessions.
Um, Thank you. In a way, you knew very well the level, the motivation, and the professional skills of Ukrainian warriors. Uh, Probably it did not surprise you that Ukrainians are so brave and that they fight so greatly. We all know that there were some prognosis uh, about 72 hours, about how quickly can uh, fail Kiev and so on. And these were a prognosis from, well, Pentagon or maybe from the White House. But probably when you read those prognoses, you were completely, you disagreed with it.
I absolutely did. I would dare say that up until the time the war began, there were very few people, and this is a guess on my part, there are very few people who knew the Ukrainians as up close and personal as I did, based on my experience in Iraq. It is true that at the start of the war, there was concern about the overwhelming firepower and resources available to Mr. Putin and his army. But in all things involving warfare, you must never underestimate the motivation and the sense of patriotism of the soldiers on the ground who fight not for themselves, but for the love of their country and for the men with whom they serve on their left and right. And I can tell you that from my experience in Iraq, that the Ukrainian soldier was second to none. They fought with great bravery in Iraq, and I am not at all surprised now that they are being resourced to a greater degree and being trained in the art of combined arms concepts, that they, again, did not surprise me as to the way that they could fight. And I honestly believe that properly resourced, they will defeat the Russian army in detail.
For sure. And should we have enough armament, enough weaponry? Of course, it concerns equally the counteroffensive that we're all waiting for, and also equally, I think that if there would be enough weaponry before, in summer 2022 or in autumn, probably the victory would be gained by now. But still, now at the moment, we are waiting for armament, for weaponry, and so on. And that's also one of the reasons why we are filming the program, why we call it synthetic warfare, because I think that everything that we are doing is a fight. Of course, not as hard, far not as hard as the fight on the battlefields, but I think we should do everything what is possible and even more to get enough weaponry for the fighters on the battlefield. So my questions are mainly, I'm interested always. I keep asking, what could we possibly do else? What can be else done from Ukrainians, from Ukraine, to get that weaponry, which is in enormous quantities somewhere in the Nevada and sands and Nebraska, Colorado, and whatever, California, and so on. And we see these photos of tens of thousands of different tanks and HIMARSs and so on and so on. And that's probably, even if we could have get 2% of it, it would be enough. What else could we do to get more?
Well, of course, it's a very good question. And the question addresses issues at what I call the strategic political level. When we engage in warfare, we engage at various levels. Of course, there is the tactical level where our brave Ukrainian soldiers, or where the brave Ukrainian soldiers are face to face with their Russian enemy and doing so well with what they have. You then have the operational level, which is how the generals and the colonels employ those brave soldiers on the ground in combat. You then have the strategic level. What are the higher ranking generals in coordination with your political leadership thinking what they must do on the ground in order to put together the operational picture to be executed at the tactical level? Then you have the strategic political. Now, this is an area where, admittedly, I have some experience. I had the pleasure of serving as the executive officer to a 4-star general. And I'm not totally ignorant of what has to happen at that level. However, I would share with you, in order to answer your question, is that the key is to, one, ensure that you are doing everything, that is, Ukraine is doing everything it can possibly do at the tactical and operational level of war with what they currently have. Because nothing convinces the other nations that seek to support Ukraine in one form or another more than victory, with winning at the tactical level. Everyone likes to support the winner. Likewise, at the strategic political level, the only thing that I can honestly say to answer your question is that Ukraine must be very quick to publicize its victories, what it is doing on the ground, what it needs to further win, and to do so fully engaged at the political level within the various embassies of Europe and the United States, okay? And at the very senior levels, whether it be president to president, okay, or with any of our congressional leaders, the equivalent leaders in Ukraine, tirelessly emphasizing those requirements necessary to ensure total victory and the defeat of the evil that has beset this wonderful country.
Sir, if I may ask you, the confusion comes with us or with Ukrainians is that the Congress, the American people, have voted for a Lend-Lease over a year ago. The president has signed it almost a year ago, a year ago, 9th of May, for a Lend-Lease. But so far, nothing, not even one can of Spam has arrived on the program of Lend-Lease. We're only sending the packages of money, but not a hardware. General Kellogg, General Petraeus, General Clark said that the reason we're not doing it is because we don't want Ukraine to win the war.
We don't want to what?
We don't want Ukrainians to win the war. So,
Oh, well, I
said exact words that General Kellogg said was, if we wanted the Ukraine to win the war, they would have won it a long time ago.
well,
We would have given them all the weapons they need.
okay. I will be quite honest with you and tell you that I was not privy to those comments by those very, very fine gentlemen and soldiers. I respect all of them. So I will not comment on what they may have or may not have said. I will tell you this, though. You received a very fine answer regarding that from another excellent general officer regarding the political machinations involved with Lend-Lease vice the way Ukraine is currently being supported. In fact, there have been, I must take issue, there have been a number of resources that have been provided to Ukraine. Now, I would be the first to say that it is clearly not enough to achieve the kind of victory that Ukraine wishes to achieve against the what were and to a large degree continues to be the overwhelming force of a much larger and resourced country in the form of modern day Russia. However, there are a great deal of things ongoing, as you know. There is a great deal of training ongoing in places like Romania, in Poland, in Spain, and I believe now in the United States, that a great deal of munitions, though I would add not enough, have been made available and will continue to be made available to Ukrainian forces. But these resources, to include the HIMARS, the artillery that has been provided, and the tanks soon to be provided by the United States, represent something outside of Lend-Lease, which is the focus of your question. And I know that this was a significant concern in the previous interview that I was able to observe. But the gentleman who you interviewed answered the question quite well. There is concern at the political level in the United States that once a certain bill is passed, that it gives certain people with other intentions the ability to add things to the bill that are not necessarily in keeping with the best interests of the other party. And in my view, in many cases, not in the best interests of the United States. That has nothing to do with Ukraine. I honestly believe that my country, our country, Yuri, I honestly believe, given our long enmity toward the former Soviet Union, okay, which was the scourge of the earth, I think you'll agree. And now Russia under Putin, I don't doubt for a minute that the United States would like to see them defeated in battle. And therefore, I think the United States will continue to support the effort. But a great deal more work, I think, will have to be done with respect to ensuring that if Lend-Lease is truly approved, that nothing else can be done to the bill that would make it less than satisfactory to all Americans and not just one party. So we have a political issue, I think, to address here in our own country. In the meantime, recognizing that Ukraine is getting ready for a counteroffensive of some time, which I believe will be tied to the successful completion of the training that is currently ongoing for so many Ukrainian soldiers, and the delivery of other key aspects or resources. Most importantly, I believe, are artillery, munitions. I think that once those items are delivered, that Ukraine will be in very good shape to execute the mission that they're required, though not as quickly as we would like to see in the event that Lend-Lease was finally approved.
I think that Lend-Lease would be a win-win story because the ammunition, the armament, the weaponry was already produced, and previous decades of taxpayers already gave their money to build up all of it. So if it is taken right from the conservation and provided to Ukraine, it only looks like it is not putting an additional burden on nowadays taxpayers. It is because the previous generation of taxpayers already paid for that ammunition. And that's why it is a pity not to use it, because that type of armament that is standing now in conservation can probably not be used in any other war, because the war now is more um, um, the way they fight. I mean, the Russian army, the armament, the type of it, it is previous generation armament. And should there be another contemporary war, that type of ammunition would probably not be satisfactory. That's why I think that the all things that are conservated could have been provided to Ukraine. Ukraine would win the war. Everyone would have the dividends of the victory. And also, as the main partner, United States would feel, even in the economics of United States, would be a growth. Every time there is a victory, there is always an economical growth. It's like already, I don't know, it's Christomatic. So it is quite, I think, useful to take something already produced, give to the fighters, and win. Whereas if really we have now to beg for some more weaponry that should be produced, that should be paid, always a bill, and so on, it might be getting tiring for even American supporters of Ukraine. This is the question that makes me so, in a way, nervous.
And of course, your nervousness is perfectly understandable. And I don't disagree with you. Uh, and I think most Americans would not disagree with you with regard to the fundamental argument that you make. But I unfortunately, as a soldier, having seen it so many times in my career, we often know what is the right thing to do. And I know that Yuri is going to smile at this, but too often the things that occur, and why I took so much time before to explain the issue of the tactical level versus the operational versus the strategic political, that the decisions made at that level uh, inevitably involve a number of things that I suspect are discussed at some length uh, with your senior leaders, by our senior leaders here in the United States, and of course, I am certainly not privy to those discussions. I read a great deal, uh, but the political machinations associated with Lend-Lease, with releasing certain stocks of things uh, that our generals want to ensure are available to our forces in the event that we find ourselves engaged in operations elsewhere, perhaps in the Pacific, okay, are strategic political issues that are very delicate. And I recognize very, very frustrating to the average person, certainly people like yourself, Yura, myself, uh, but uh, but I think the United States, nonetheless, and our NATO allies will be very careful to ensure that Ukraine is able to fight on. And I believe in due course, defeat the Russian army. And I think that's probably about as good as it gets right now from me. But I will tell you that, frustratingly so, we're looking at time. And unfortunately, time often translates into blood and treasure that impacts Ukraine primarily. And that's a shame, because I know that many of my comrades, perhaps today, they were young soldiers 20 years ago, perhaps are officers on the field today. And I personally wish that they could have everything that they need to win. But I believe that in due course they will triumph, and I believe that my country will continue to support, as will the other countries of NATO.
I missed a very important part in introducing Colonel Tiso. Colonel Tiso comes from a long line of military infantrymen. His father was a hero during World War II, fought in the European theater. His uncles did too. And Colonel Tiso is a World War II buff. As we ran and ran and ran forever, he kept. I couldn't breathe because the diaphragm was pushing on my brain already. But Colonel Tiso, without breaking a sweat, kept telling me World War II stories of his father, and we discussed a great deal of tragedy of World War II, a tragedy of my people, of Jewish people during World War II, of Italian people, of Colonel Tiso's ethnic group. And today, we probably, Marie and I, will also come beyond the strategic and political military affairs and the way it looks at it. We're looking at it from a humanitarian point of view, the suffering that the Ukrainian people are going through, the amount of dead and wounded today in Miami. Right now, we have quite a few wounded Ukrainian young men that have no legs or arms. And destruction, where the cities are being wiped off the face of the earth. There are 10 million, 20 million refugees, 10 million within the country and 10 million already outside of the country of Ukraine that lost absolutely everything. There are Ukrainian children that are being stolen. They're talking about 20,000 Ukrainian kids being taken to Russia, their parents being killed, and they're being taken to Russia to make Russian soldiers out of them, or whatever they're making out of them. They're orphans, poor orphans. So the humanitarian side of this disaster is just enormous. It is something that Colonel Tiso and I discussed at length about World War II and the tragedy that it caused. And right now it's happening again. And yet the whole world, as it did during World War II, looking at Poland, looking Czech Republic at the time, Czechoslovakia, thinking that they can pacify another Hitler or another maniac, another Stalin. We cannot pacify them. We need to kill them. We simply need to kill them.
Well, we obviously had it right in 1945. And of course, at the end of that Great War, the United States was very generous with respect to the Marshall Plan, and we effectively rebuilt Europe. You know, Yuri, something that a lot of people don't know is that the United States actually offered the Marshall Plan to the Soviet Union. But of course, Stalin walked away from that. And, you know, it was obvious then in 1947 that the individual intended to make it a point to take Europe all for himself. And of course, as a result, we ended up fighting in a number of places in Europe. Greece immediately comes to mind, as you know, when we had to defeat the communists in Greece. There were a number of political battles that had to be fought throughout Europe, certainly in Austria and in other countries. And then, of course, 1950 comes along, and in essence, the United States was really fighting the Soviets in North Korea, as well as by December of 1950, we were fighting the Chinese. And so the issue of what followed, of course, was the continuation of the Cold War until 1990. And now, of course, we have this individual who is dead set on restoring what President Reagan once referred to as the evil empire, what was the Soviet Union. Putin, of course, is a product of that era. He is KGB. We can go on and on about him. The point that I would make is that there is always evil in the world. It must be confronted. I think that Ukraine right now is in the forefront of confronting that evil. I believe that the NATO and particularly the United States, while looking to avoid a world war, is nonetheless behind Ukraine. I believe in a very big way, and I believe it will continue to be. Although, again, I ask Maria and, of course, you, Yuri, to understand what has already been said in interviews past about the very, very difficulty associated with Lend-Lease and the problems that we have politically in our government associated with that. Again, nonetheless, I believe that the United States will be there for Ukraine. I can't help but believe that's the case after everything that has already been provided. And I believe that when all is said and done, however the war ends, I believe that the United States and NATO will be there for Ukraine. I would like to think in a big way, but we will have to see, again, what the strategic political level decides is the appropriate approach. I wish it was as easy as it was for me at the tactical level with Ukrainian forces in Iraq.
I understand, sir. But, also Ukrainians are very concerned with the propaganda inside of Ukraine, which is beyond my understanding. But they're saying Ukrainians are very much afraid of that if Republicans take office, and even if Trump becomes the president of the United States again, that he would definitely give up and hand Ukraine over to Putin. Do you share that or not?
Well, I can only offer an opinion because I have read those comments and recognizing that the American people, by and large, think very well of the brave Ukrainian people. And I believe that in large measure, a lot of that is the kind of political discourse wielded by our media to make one party or the other look poorly in front of the American people. My sense is that the United States will continue, as I have said already in this interview, will continue to support the Ukrainian people and the country of Ukraine. Americans admire brave people. They admire people who seek democracy and people who seek to preserve their way of life, particularly against someone like Putin and the people that he has running his government that support him. So I am not inclined to believe that will be the case, But again, that is an opinion. And like everything else, we will have to wait and see. But I believe that America remains behind the brave Ukrainian people.
Well, I just heard the news that ISIS leader who organized the killing of 11 American soldiers in Afghanistan has been eliminated. However, he has not been eliminated by our troops or our special op guys. It was eliminated by Taliban. So I guess Taliban is now kind of thankful for all the weapons we left with them, which Ukrainians left for Ukrainians. So this is another, I don't know why, but I feel sad about it, that victory should have been ours. We should have gotten that guy, as Colonel Tiso and I used to these kind of news. And also, I'd like to mention that Colonel Tiso also is a writer. He is writing a book. The book should come out, and something tells me, Colonel, that my name is mentioned in that book.
Well, of course it is, Yuri. I have, in fact, written a book. And there is a very strong indication from my publisher that it will be published late this year or very early in 24. And the book is entitled In Strange Company. And the subtitle is An American Soldier with Multinational Forces in the Middle East and Iraq. And of course, a good percentage of the book, well over 50% of the book, involves Iraq and specifically my adventures with the multinational division Central South, and therefore my adventures with the brave Ukrainian brigade. Yuri, as you know, when the first tranche of the Polish division returned home to Poland, General Tiskiewicz told me that the Minister of Defense of Poland wanted to see me. And so I was very honored by that. I secured permission to do so. And I flew to Poland in late February of 2004. And when that plane landed at the bottom of the steps from the aircraft, there was an American officer in a naval uniform, and his name was Captain Yuri Tabach. And yes, I talk about that very much. You are, in fact, mentioned in my book, and very, very proudly so. I would also like to add that when I left Iraq to return to Poland, and then, of course, to the United States, unknown to me, the Ukrainian people, at the direction of the Ukrainian Minister of Defense, had forwarded the Order of Valor and Honor to the headquarters of the multinational division Central South in Al-Hilla, Iraq, approximately 90 miles south of Baghdad. And the decoration was placed in a safe in the regional headquarters in Al-Hilla until late in 2004. By that time, I had been retired from the Army, Maria, and I was working at United States Central Command. And there was a knock on the door of the office in which I was working. And standing there was a very proud Ukrainian officer who said that he would like to see Colonel Tiso. And so I was brought to the door, and he said, "You are Colonel Tiso?" I said, "Yes, I am." And he said, and he came to a rigid position of attention. And he said, "Minister of Defense of Ukraine sends his compliments and wishes to decorate you, sir, with the Order of Valor and Honor." And a week later, I was back in uniform. in front of all of the officers of the coalition at Central Command at that time. And I was decorated by the Ukrainian general who was currently on duty at that time at the United States Central Command. And I can tell you that it was one of the proudest moments of my professional career.
And we have, and Maria will put it up. We have that in a magazine from Central Command where you're getting that award. And and of course, Maria and our viewers, you should know that when we put something in a safe so we don't lose it, we can find it later on. That is a very military style. And of course, that one medal that Colonel Tiso earned not be found. But we will keep searching for it. And I remember that day, that great day when you were coming out of the military cargo, Polish cargo airplane, all tired, and the sand is in your uniform, and you see me, and your eyes light up. And of course, the Poles at that time came in two flights, two different airplanes. So I come up and I run up to the colonel and I say, "Sir, where's the other half of the contingency, Polish contingency?" And in a typical Tiso style, he put your hand on my shoulder and he told me, "Yuri, they something like you said, something they have fallen during my PT physical training exercise." And I said, "Oh yeah, well that I believe in." I almost died
Well,
myself.
we had there was a great deal of fun in working with the multinational division, certainly with the Poles, Bulgarians, the Ukrainians, the Georgians. Um, these were wonderful people. And you know, Maria, when I was a young officer, I was commissioned in the early 70s. And of course, the Cold War was very much the order of the day. And all of my training at that time focused entirely on the defeat of Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact. And of course, that included all of the countries with whom I would later serve and advise and come to love in Iraq. And so for me, it was a total turnaround. And on my uniform today are the decorations, of course, of Ukraine, as you know, of Poland, of Bulgaria, and of Hungary. I also wear the Army Staff Badge of Ukraine, which was presented to me by the brigade commander, the Ukrainian brigade commander, at a luncheon that we once had. He surprised me immensely. And it too is located on that board behind me that my daughters put together for me upon my retirement from the Army.
But
I
more,
am immensely proud of those decorations, and I wear them with great pride.
but more importantly, sir, is that one of your students and your brother in arms was the first Soviet-born commissioned officer.
Absolutely, Yuri. And I tell everyone with
And
whom I meet that
unless
you were first naval foreign area specialist in the United States Navy.
that's true too. That's another thing. I was first. I forgot about that. But Maria, if you don't, do you have any more questions for the good colonel?
I think that when all the world considered, I mean the Western world, considered Soviet Union as the main enemy, and a lot of things were done, and NATO was created, and it was well trained, and much ammunition and weaponry was produced. Everything was quite impressively done. But by the moment when really Soviet Union uh, began the war, that's Actually, you can say 2008 with Georgia, or 2014 with Crimea, or you can say the full-scale invasion, 2022. At that moment, of course, there is an international legion in the Ukrainian army, but basically, Ukrainians are fighting for the whole world. And Ukrainians, the new type of army, maybe now, today, Ukrainian army is the strongest and the best army of Europe. And it made its evolution from, it was previously, 30 years ago, it had to make an evolution from the Soviet type of um, everything, of philosophy, of everything, into an absolute European Western type of thinking and of planning. And that's why I think that um, the Western countries, they have a certain, mm, it's not a must maybe, but they have a moral debt. They cannot just say that Ukraine is going to fight for all of us. We were building up NATO, we were saying very important words, we were making Cold War and so on. And now, when it came up to the point when that precisely inheritor of Soviet Union, with the weaponry, with everything, it just changed the how do you say, the вывеска, the etiquette. It just changed that part, and the rest of it stayed. And now Ukraine's fighting almost alone. My question is, um, there is a certain similarity to what was happening in World War II, and then the world named it all Nazism. Now, what's going on? Some countries are thinking, should they involve or they should not? How deep they should involve? In World War II, same thing happened when Churchill convinced finally Roosevelt to deliver Lend-Lease. 2 years of fight all alone. But also, I think that we already say about Russia that this is Russism. And I even think that there is a certain schizophrenia going on with the whole population, because the Putin and his idea of conquering the whole world with his atomic bombs, and this poverty around him that still supports that idiotic idea. This is a schizo-Russism. What do you think about that new word, so to say? Uh, can that be used towards Russia and towards what's happening?
Well, you've built a lot into your question, and I will attempt to answer it this way. First, it is my sincere hope, as difficult as it is for Ukraine and the Ukrainian people and the comrades that I served with, who I think of every day and who I miss a great deal. I hope it is not lost on them that the United States has given a great deal to Ukraine in support of the defense of Ukraine. One can always argue what is enough. During World War II, of course, Germany, Hitler, made a huge mistake when, on the day after Pearl Harbor was bombed by the Japanese, he took it upon himself to declare war on the United States. Not a very smart move on his part. It's considered one of the biggest strategic errors that he made, along with the invasion of Russia. But that's another issue. The point that I would make is that the circumstances of that era and the circumstances today are different, both certainly politically. The United States had no choice but to do everything that it did, everything that we made, everything that we produced in this country, all went to one purpose, and that was defeating Nazi Germany and, of course, the Empire of Japan. And oh, by the way, by the time that war ended in the Pacific, one could argue that we were running out of the things we needed to continue the war in the event that the Japanese had not surrendered with the dropping of the 2 atomic bombs. There is tremendous difficulty with the interaction of senior leadership at the strategic political level. When I am on the ground with Ukrainian soldiers 20 years ago, there was no doubt what we had to do, what we needed. And by and large, I am very proud that I was able to get at the tactical level the things that my Ukrainian brothers needed to fight and win their small part of the battle. As you go up that chain, as I have described, to the operational, to the strategic, and then to the all-important strategic political, you run into issues that are so complicated, that impact the United States, that impact NATO, that impact what people would say could influence the general peace in the world, particularly when you have someone like Putin, or I will probably mispronounce his name, Medvedev.
Medvedev.
Thank you. We Americans are not good at that stuff. That's why I needed Yuri so badly in Poland. But I would just share with you, these are people who are saying that we are on the cusp of World War III. Well, in many ways, I think the world has been on the cusp of World War III since May of 1945. There was a short hiatus when Soviet Union came apart. Somehow I knew in my own mind that after we defeated the Saddam Hussein, that there was going to be a comeback. And sure enough, we are seeing it, and we have been seeing it now for the past 10 or 20 years, and now it is in our face. Where will it lead? I think the strategic political leaders have an obligation to explore every manner of peace. Because war is a terrible thing. As Yuri described, the people from Ukrainian battlefields who are already in my country, our country, attempting to get additional medical assistance for lost limbs and that sort of thing. There's a terrible cost to be paid. I felt for my Ukrainian soldiers, and in fact, every soldier with whom I served in Iraq 20 years ago, and I feel for the Ukrainian soldiers today. And I pray each day that they will be given what they need. And I like to think that at the strategic political level, that there are enough good men and women who will ensure that resources continue to flow to this great country so that it can protect itself. And as you say, protect so many other nations in Europe. And we pray for their victory and their success.
Amen.
Thank you, Colonel.
Sir, and final question. If Ukraine will call upon you, will you go?
I would make it very clear, and Maria, you should carry this message. If my comrades call me, I need a plane ticket. That is all.
I didn't
I will
expect
come.
any other question from my colonel. And sir, it would be an honor serve with you side by side. It was always my dream. It was always one day, even if it's going to be in the next life, we will serve you. Sir, it's been an honor to know you and to serve alongside you.
Thank you very much, Yuri. And Maria, may I add that because I speak very little Russian beyond splasiva and those kinds of quick words that I remember from 20 years ago, if Ukraine does call me, then they must call Yura because he will serve as my interpreter translator. Thank you so very much. My pleasure.
Thank you very, very much. My pleasure. Thank you.